The crystal glasses clinked as my mother stood up, her perfect posture and practiced smile commanding attention from all 52 relatives gathered in our family's garden for the annual reunion. I watched her carefully, noting how her hand trembled slightly as she gripped her champagne glass. Something was off about her today. She'd been too quiet, too observant, like a predator waiting to strike. "I have an announcement to make," she declared, her voice carrying across the perfectly manicured lawn. My sister Emma sat beside me, both of us sharing a questioning look. At 28, I learned to read our mother's moods, and right now, every instinct told me something was wrong. "For 30 years, I've carried a secret," Mom continued, her eyes scanning the crowd before fixing on Emma. "It's time everyone knew the truth about my youngest daughter." The air seemed to freeze. I felt Emma stiffen beside me. "Caroline," my father warned from his seat, but Mom waved him off. "Emma isn't really part of this family," she announced, pointing her glass at my sister. "She's not your real sister, Alexandra. She never was." The silence that followed was deafening. I heard someone gasp, probably Aunt Margaret. She always had a flair for drama. Emma's hand found mine under the table, squeezing so tight it hurt. "What are you talking about?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper. Mom's smile turned cruel. "Your father had an affair. You're the result. I took you in, raised you as my own, but you were never really mine. Never really a Thompson." I watched Emma's face crumble, 30 years of identity shattering in seconds. But unlike everyone else at that table, I wasn't shocked. I'd been waiting for this moment, prepared for it. "That's interesting, Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady as I reached for my purse. "Really interesting timing." "Alexandra, don't," my father pleaded, but I was done keeping quiet. "You see," I continued, pulling out a thick manila envelope, "I've been carrying a secret too. Found it 6 months ago while helping Dad clean out the attic." Mom's face flickered with uncertainty. "What are you talking about?" "DNA tests, Mom, from 30 years ago. The ones you had done when Emma was born." I started pulling out papers. "The ones that proved Emma is Dad's daughter. And yours." The champagne glass slipped from Mom's hand, shattering on the patio stones. Emma gasped beside me. "But that's not the interesting part," I pressed on, my voice carrying across the deadly quiet garden. "The interesting part is the other set of results. The ones about me." Now Mom was pale, her perfect composure cracking. "Alexandra, stop this immediately." "Why?" "Because everyone might learn that I'm the one who isn't Dad's biological daughter. That you're the one who had an affair." The collective intake of breath from our relatives was almost comical. Aunt Margaret actually clutched her pearls. "How dare you?" Mom hissed, but her hands were shaking violently now. "The funny thing about secrets, Mom," I said, standing up slowly, "is that they always come out. I found these tests months ago. I could have exposed you then, but I waited. I waited because I knew you. Knew you'd eventually try to hurt Emma like you've hurt me my entire life. The constant criticism, the subtle digs, the way you've tried to pit us against each other." Emma was staring at the papers in my hand, tears streaming down her face. I squeezed her shoulder gently. "You see, Mom, I've known I wasn't Dad's biological daughter for months. And you know what? It doesn't matter. Dad knew too. We talked about it. He's been my father in every way that counts, just like Emma's been my sister." My father stood up then, moving to stand between us and Mom. "That's enough, Diana," he said firmly. "I think you should leave." "John, you can't possibly." "I can and I will," he cut her off. "I've watched you try to divide our daughters for years. No more." The garden erupted in whispers as my mother stood there, her perfect world crumbling around her. Emma was still clutching my hand, processing everything she'd heard. "Why?" she finally asked, looking at our mother. "Why would you try to hurt me like this?" Mom didn't answer. She couldn't. Instead, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the stone path as she retreated into the house. I sat back down beside Emma, pulling her into a hug. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "I knew she'd try something like this eventually. I couldn't let her hurt you. You knew? All this time." Emma pulled back, searching my face. "Why didn't you tell me?" I wiped a tear from her cheek. "Because it doesn't change anything. You're my sister. Always have been, always will be. DNA doesn't make a family, love does." The relatives were still whispering, some approaching with questions, others hanging back uncertainly, but none of that mattered. What mattered was my sister, and the truth that had finally set us both free from our mother's manipulations. But this was just the beginning. Mom's revelation had backfired spectacularly, but I knew her well enough to know this wasn't over. She wouldn't take this humiliation lying down. The question was, what would she do next? The days following the reunion were a blur of phone calls and family drama. Relatives chose sides, as they always do when secrets explode. Some, like Aunt Margaret, declared they were too devastated to speak to anyone involved. Others, particularly the younger cousins, bombarded us with messages of support and decades-old stories of Mom's manipulative behavior. Emma moved in with me temporarily, unable to face returning to her apartment where Mom had a spare key. We spent late nights talking, piecing together our childhood memories with this new understanding. Remember when Mom insisted I take dance lessons instead of joining the science club? Emma said one evening, curled up on my couch. She said it was because I had natural grace, but she knew I loved dancing, I finished. She was making sure we never shared the same interests. How did you handle knowing the truth for so long? I poured us both another glass of wine. Honestly, it was hard. But after I found those DNA results, so many things made sense. The way she always compared us, how she praised me to you and praised you to me, always keeping us slightly at odds. Our conversation was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Through the peephole, I saw Dad standing there, looking exhausted. "Your mother's gone off the deep end," he announced as we let him in. "She's threatening to contest the trust fund grandmother left for both of you. Says she has proof that Emma isn't entitled to it because she's not real family." "She can't do that," I said firmly. "Those DNA tests prove Emma is her daughter." "She's claiming the tests are fake, says you doctored them to humiliate her." Emma's face fell. Why does she hate me so much? Dad sat heavily on the couch. "She doesn't hate you, sweetheart. She hates herself. Always has. The affair that resulted in Alexandra. It's been eating at her for 30 years. Instead of dealing with it, she projected everything onto you." "But why expose it now?" Emma asked. "Because of grandmother's letter," I said quietly. "The one that arrived last week." Dad nodded. "You knew about that too." "Grandmother sent me a copy. She's updating her will, isn't she? Making Emma the primary beneficiary of the family estate." Emma's head snapped up. "What?" "Grandmother always saw through Mom's games," I explained. "She watched how you took care of her during her hospital stay last year. How you visited every day while Mom was too busy with her social commitments. She decided the family estate should go to someone who values family over status. Your mother found out somehow," Dad added. "She thought if she could prove Emma wasn't family, the estate would go to her instead," I finished. "But she didn't count on me having proof of Emma's parentage, or of her own affair." A new knock at the door made us all jump. This time it was a courier with a thick envelope marked urgente, legal documentes. "She's really doing it," Dad said as I opened the papers. "She's contesting the trust fund." I scanned the documents and started to laugh. Emma and Dad stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "Oh, Mom," I said, wiping tears of mirth from my eyes. "She really should have checked the trust's original terms." "What do you mean?" Emma asked. "Grandmother's original trust document from 20 years ago. It specifically states that inheritance is not contingent on biological relationship, but on being a legally recognized family member. Even if Emma wasn't her biological grandchild, which she is, she's still legally recognized as part of the family. Mom's lawsuit is dead before it starts." "How do you know all this?" Dad asked, amazed. I smiled. "Because grandmother told me. She knew something like this might happen. She's always been 10 steps ahead of Mom's schemes." "So what do we do now?" Emma asked. "Now," I said, pulling out my phone, "we call grandmother. I think it's time she came home from her spa retreat and dealt with her daughter directly." Dad's eyes widened. "Margaret's coming home. Diana won't handle that well." "That's the point," I replied, dialing. "Mom needs to learn she can't manipulate this family anymore. And no one handles her quite like grandmother." As the phone rang, I caught Emma's eye and winked. Mom thought she was playing chess, but she didn't realize she was about to face the grandmaster. Grandmother Margaret Thompson didn't earn her reputation as the family matriarch by letting anyone, even her own daughter, tear her family apart. The next move would change everything, and Mom wouldn't see it coming until it was too late. Grandmother arrived like a force of nature the next morning, her silver hair perfectly styled and her presence commanding as ever. At 75, Margaret Thompson could still silence a room with a single raised eyebrow. "Well," she said, settling into my living room armchair, "Diana's certainly made a mess of things, hasn't she?" Before anyone could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Patricia. "Your mother's at the country club telling everyone you're mentally unstable, and Emma's trying to steal her inheritance. What's going on?" Grandmother read the message over my shoulder and smiled. Predictable. When Diana feels cornered, she always runs to her country club friends. "Shall we pay her a visit?" "Is that wise?" Dad asked. "John," Grandmother fixed in with a stern look, "wisdom has nothing to do with it. This ends today." An hour later, our small convoy pulled into the Mountain View Country Club parking lot. Mom's Mercedes was parked in her usual spot, front row, closest to the entrance. Some things never changed. We found her holding court at her regular table on the terrace, surrounded by her usual audience of social climbers and gossip mongers. "Completely fabricated those DNA results," we heard her saying. "My poor Alexandra, she's always been jealous of Emma's place in the family." "Really, Diana?" Grandmother's voice cut through the chatter like a knife. "Is that the story you're going with?" The color drained from Mom's face as she turned to find us standing there. Grandmother in front, Emma and me flanking her, Dad bringing up the rear. "Mother," she stammered, "you're supposed to be at the spa. And you're supposed to be a decent mother to your daughters, but here we are." Grandmother sat down uninvited at the table. "Ladies, I apologize, but I need a moment with my daughter. Family business." Mom's friends scattered like startled pigeons, though they didn't go far. This was the juiciest drama they'd seen in years. "Now then," Grandmother continued, her voice carrying just enough to ensure the lingering audience could hear every word. "Let's discuss your recent behavior." "Mother, please," Mom hissed. "This isn't the place." "Oh, but it is. You chose to air our family's private matters here. So here is where we'll resolve them." Grandmother pulled out a folder. "I have here the original DNA tests from 30 years ago. My copy, not Alexandra's. I also have proof of your affair with Richard Bennett, including hotel receipts and love letters. Would you like me to share them with your friends?" Mom's hands trembled as she reached for her water glass. "You kept those." "I keep everything, Diana. You know that. I also have here the trust fund documents you're so eager to contest. Would you like me to read aloud the clause about legally recognized family members?" "Why are you doing this?" Mom whispered. "Because you need to stop." It was Emma who spoke, her voice steady. "You've spent 30 years punishing everyone for your own mistakes. It's enough." "You don't understand," Mom began, but I cut her off. "We understand perfectly. You couldn't live with your own guilt, so you projected it onto Emma. You couldn't face your own affair, so you tried to accuse Dad of one. You couldn't accept that Grandmother saw through your facades, so you tried to destroy the trust fund." "The trust fund remains as is," Grandmother declared. "Emma and Alexandra will share it equally as intended. The estate will go to Emma, also as intended. And you, Diana, will seek professional help." "Or what?" Mom challenged, a flash of her old defiance showing through. "Or I release everything. The DNA tests, the affair evidence, the financial records showing how you've been embezzling from the family foundation. Everything." Mom's glass clattered against her teeth. "How did you?" "Like I said, I keep everything. Your choice, Diana. Get help, make amends with your daughters, or lose everything, including your precious social standing." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the eavesdropping ladies had stopped pretending to not listen. Finally, Mom's shoulders slumped. "I need help," she whispered. "Yes, you do," Dad said gently. "We found a good therapist. You start tomorrow." As we left the country club, Emma linked her arm through mine. "Is it really over?" "The drama? Yes. The healing? That's just beginning." I squeezed her arm. "But we'll do it together. That's what real sisters are for." Grandmother overheard us and smiled. "You know, Alexandra, when you found those DNA tests months ago, you could have used them to hurt your mother, to get revenge. Instead, you waited, protected Emma, and let the truth come out naturally. That's why you're getting half the trust fund. I thought the trust fund was always meant to be split equally." "It was. But you earned it not because of biology or legal documents, but because you understand what family really means. She patted my cheek. Now shall we go home? I believe we have a long overdue family dinner to plan. Walking to our cars, I caught a glimpse of Mom through the country club windows. She sat alone at her table, looking lost. For the first time in years, I felt hope for her, and for all of us. Sometimes it takes shattering everything to build something stronger in its place. The truth had finally set us all free.